Hey everybody, we're back at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. He's Jason, I'm Chucky, the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. And Jay, we've got a lot to cover. I mean, it's bowl season, World Cup is winding down now to the finals. So much is going on in basketball and hockey and football. I guess we'll start with pro football.
Jump right into pro football?
We're going to start with pro football this week and jump right into it, have some fun. All right, so Thursday night, the 49ers, arguably maybe the hottest team in football right now. The Seattle Seahawks, one of the bigger surprises in football right now, although they've kind of faltered a little bit of late. We know the Niners are down to their third-string quarterback in Brock Purdy, the injury to Deebo Samuel, so that hurts a little bit as well. They're a small favorite, 3.5-point favorite. 77% of the tickets are on the 49ers in this game. It's a rematch from a game played in Week 2 that San Francisco won 27-7. And Frisco's on a roll, 5-1 against the point spread. Their last 6 games. They're chasing Minnesota for the number 2 spot right now. But Seattle, the last 14 times that they have hosted the 49ers, they are 12-2 against the number. That's why we've seen, I think, a little Seahawk money start to show.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for Seattle and you're going to have to, jump in on that stat that they've been great at home. We are seeing some sharp action, taking the Seahawks, taking the 3.5. Don't know how much that has to do with the Purdy question marks, and right. Is he going to be the guy that goes? Obviously, Johnson came in, the guy that they picked up off the Denver practice squad right. After Purdy went out of those games. San Francisco dominated this game in Week 2. You talked about the 27-7 win. Seattle didn't even score an offensive touchdown that game. That was a 86-yard blocked field goal was the only way that the Seahawks were able to put the points on the board in Week 2. And I think that San Francisco 49er defense has done nothing but get better since Week 2. Going back several weeks.
I'm glad you said that, though, because, you have a young quarterback in Brock Purdy. They're able to run the ball with McCaffrey or whoever they put in the backfield. We've seen that the last couple of years. But that defense right now is the only defense in football that's given up less than 200 points. They've given up 197 points. That defense has been stout the last 6 weeks. So we know in an era with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, that offense, everybody loves offense. But defense wins championships. And right now, if you're looking for a defense that's playing better than anybody else, it's the 49ers.
Yeah, and they've got to play at home last several weeks. They had the trip to Mexico where they beat right. Arizona down there, but they've had the comforts of home, do travel on the road here. Really going to have to be what you think is the running game. Question marks in the game with Deebo Samuel most likely not suiting up, and obviously Purdy. But the Niners are the better side here. You just have to hope Seattle can find their game, which they just haven't the last couple of weeks. We've seen the Carolina Panthers and Josh Jacobs kind of just run right through them. So if the Niners are able to keep that running game going, I doubt that 3.5 points gets involved because that defense is just so good.
Well, Geno Smith has been really good. It's just we thought it would catch up with Seattle a little bit. You still have got the receivers in DK Metcalf and Lockett, and not sure if you're going to see Kenny Walker back or not. He's still listed as questionable here. But that Seattle offense has been much better than I think we all thought it would be, and getting points at home again with this real favorable record against San Francisco. As you mentioned, we've seen sharp play here. It's a much bigger game to San Francisco.
And it's a great game on a Thursday night. We finally get, these Thursday nights of not only the teams that are playing, but the Thursday nights in general have been kind of clunkers of games. So this is at least one where we have 2 playoff hopeful teams in the mix. So looking forward to finally watching and enjoying a Thursday night game.
On Thursday night in December, check the weather because it might be a little nippy, and who knows what else you might get. A little precipitation that night as well. All right, we're going to jump to the Saturday schedule now. We've got 3 games on Saturday, which is always pretty cool to have. So Ravens-Browns, we know what the Ravens' record is. They sit there at 9-4. They win ugly. They blow double-digit leads, but they're in a really good spot as far as being one of the top teams in football. They're playing without Lamar Jackson. They've owned Cleveland. In Cleveland of late, going 7-1 against the number. They're actually getting points here because we're not sure who's going to be starting at quarterback for Baltimore. They're getting 2.5, 3 points. 57% of the tickets are on the Ravens, however, in this one, getting the small number.
Well, there was a lot of money backing the Browns last week against Cincinnati, and they didn't get home for them. Cincinnati, even without some key players, was able to cover that point spread. Baltimore wins the first matchup here back in Week 7, right. 23-20. Lamar Jackson didn't have a particularly big game. I only think he only threw for 120 yards. Cleveland had 2 key fumbles in the game that they lost. So this is a spot why we see Cleveland flipping to the favorite in this game, but it just doesn't seem like they've found their groove. You introduced Deshaun Watson back to the team. We haven't seen Chubb and Hunt Really, Hunt's been doing a whole lot of
right.
nothing, and it's really just been Amari Cooper, an occasional Njoku thrown in there. But Cleveland just hasn't been able to find any consistent offense. And one of the things I want to give a shout out to Scrappy KK back in the hub as we go through.
Scrappy KK, I love it.
And we look at all of our numbers and things that we're doing, and we talk about these games that are 3s and 7s and key numbers in the NFL. And he was digging up some nuggets in the things that we do and the numbers that we call key numbers since 2015 when we changed the field goal back to the 33-yard line, that more games have landed onto 221 games, or 10.8% of the games land on 2. And that used to always be kind of where 3 was at, about 10 to 11% of 3. And 3 is only landing 8.2% of the time. And strangely enough, 5, another number that we said was a dead number throughout the years, 5 has landed 133 times at 6.5%, and 7, obviously what we call a key number, has landed 125 times at 6.1%. So when we talk about key numbers being 3 and 7, it's amazing to look and say 2 and 5 actually land more than 3 and 7. So when you're buying down to 2 or buying off of 2 or buying off of 5, the math is kind of working in your favor by the results.
I think it really is about analytics now, and we've talked about that before. You see so many teams, say you're down 14, you score that touchdown where you could kick the extra point and go down 7, they're going for 2. And if they're not making it, that's what's causing it not to fall games on 7 many times, because it falls 8 then if that's the case. So a lot of it's on analytics. We look at it sometimes and we think they should go or they shouldn't go, but you hear them talk about the analytics of the game and why they do or why they don't. We don't always agree with it, but it's what it is in today's football.
Yeah, I mean, just especially thinking the amount of buys that are off 3, the buys that are off 7, to know games aren't landing at the clip that they used to, and that 2 and 5 is landing a lot more. It might be just worth laying that 3.5 instead of laying 3, with the numbers just not falling.
I'm not laying 3.5. I'm still laying 3. All right, another game on Saturday. Colts Vikings. I mean, you look at Minnesota now, and for me, they're a paper tiger. I mean, they're ranked number 2 in the NFC as we come into it. They had the one big win on Thanksgiving against the Patriots, but got demolished at home the week before that against Dallas. I think the fact that they were a underdog against Detroit this past weekend, being 10-2 going into that game, just showed that even the bettors, even you guys, don't have a whole lot of faith in the Minnesota Vikings right now. They play this game against Indianapolis. They're a small favorite, 4.5 point favorite. Indy's 5-0 straight up their last 5 versus Minnie. Minnie has gone over 5 of their last 6 home games. They like to score games at home, but there is an overwhelming amount of tickets, almost the highest ticket count of the week. 86% of the tickets in this one right now are on the Minnesota Vikings as the Colts come off their bye and try to straighten out that offense.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with what we've seen this Colts team kind of be of late, staying in games, and then eventually it's the Matt Ryan turnover show, or they just find a way to fall out of games. They got absolutely destroyed by the Cowboys before the bye week, so that's what people are remembering. Maybe Jeff Saturday can get them back and going after the bye week and try and find something against this Viking team that, you talk about, that secondary just continues to give up high passing yards, but it's not one of the things that the Colts do well.
Right. They may have to in this game,
to
though,
exploit
right?
that. So they're going to have to find receivers. Matt Ryan's going to have to play a good game. We haven't seen that number 1 fantasy guy, Jonathan Taylor. He's been a disappearing act this year, so that hasn't been a big part of the Colts game. And I think the Vikings can clinch the NFC North with a win here, depending on what the Lions do against the Jets. I actually don't even think if the Lions win or not, the Vikings can clinch the division with a win here. So just another reason for them, despite the fact that they've kind of had some rough games here of late, they can still solidify themselves into the playoffs with a win here.
They're still trying to hold on to that number 2 spot with San Francisco, right on their tail at number 3 right now. I think that when you look at if Matt Ryan can get some protection with Alec Pearson, Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, I think he can open up this game where maybe you do see some points scored here. They're coming off their bye. They know that Minnesota's not good in the back end. Hopefully they can exploit that a little bit and see if Matt Ryan can put some points on the board against the Vikings.
We do know what Minnesota's good at, and that's finding Justin Jefferson, and so that'll be a key for them this week. Indianapolis has a pretty solid defensive backfield, or their pass statistics are pretty good. They do a little bit more in the running game, so maybe Dalvin Cook can find a little bit more, some holes here, but I think that at anytime you're watching a Viking game, you're looking to see the scary Justin Jefferson potentially go off.
And then maybe the best game of the three is Saturday night, a big AFC East battle between the Dolphins and Bills, a rematch these two teams played earlier in the season. I think it was week 2 or maybe week 3. Week 3, Miami won 21-19. They're on a 2-game skid right now. They've really struggled in their 2 West Coast games. Now they fly back east. They play Saturday night in what could be a snow game in Orchard Park. Bills are over a touchdown favorite here. They've moved into the number 1 seed now in the AFC. And if you're the Bills, you want to hold on to every game right now because, as we've talked about, much tougher for any team to have to go play them there in late January when it potentially could be for a trip to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and if you go back to this game, the first game was in Miami winning 21-19, a game landing on a 2 again. But Buffalo was actually in field goal range with the clock winding down and weren't able to get on the field to kick the field goal. Otherwise, they were in a potential winning situation there. You talked about Miami's struggles the last 2 weeks, getting beat up in San Francisco, and then the Chargers performing a really great game defensively. 2 games which Tua has not looked good. Jalen Waddle has just been a disappearing act. Jeff Wilson is now banged up. But Tyreek Hill has been fantastic. Outside of the Mahomes and Jalen Hurts from an MVP standpoint, you can really make the argument that Tyreek Hill has been the difference with this Dolphins team. But what a tough trip. We've talked about this for the last several weeks, having to go to San Francisco, to the Chargers, and now all the way back
spend 2 weeks out west
to play Buffalo
on a short week.
On a Saturday. The Bills haven't been blowing teams out the way they were early in the season at home. The Jets were able to hang in with them. Actually had a chance late in the game to tie that game up in Buffalo, not necessarily in the red zone, but in that territory. So it is a bigger number when you're laying over that touchdown, and I think you're going to get kind of a Super Bowl effort here from the Dolphins. This is essentially putting them with a 3-game losing streak and really knocking them out of playoff contention with the way these other teams are sneaking up on them. So this is a monster spot for the Dolphins. The one thing that I kind of caution everybody, and we talk about handicapping strategies and things to look at as we sit in Week 15 of the NFL season. We always talk about who's hurt and who's playing, and a lot of times we're looking at key wide receivers or running backs. But at this point in time, you need to look at injuries that are I call them cluster injuries, where you're missing 2 or 3 guys on your offensive line, or you're missing 2 defensive backs or 2 linebackers, and that's really been the case for the Dolphins the last couple of weeks. They've had 5 starters on defense that have been out of these games. They've had 2 starters on offense on the offensive line that have missed these games. So really start to check the status of these cluster injuries, not on your big high ticket players, your wide receivers, your quarterbacks, your running backs, but look at the interior linemen, look at the linebackers, look at the cornerbacks, and if teams are missing 2 starters in one of those kind of core defensive areas or an offensive line area, it might be something you want to play against or take you off a game, because that's where you're seeing these teams struggle. And every team is hurting right now. If you pulled up the injury list and saw the number of guys that are questionable in a lot of these games, there's 8 to 10 to 12 guys that are questionable in these games. So be real conscientious and go check out those injury lists before putting your money down on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, I was going to add that on to what you had said, is that every team's beat up now, but a lot of it's who you have in that second and third spot behind those guys. What kind of veteran presence do you have? Can guys step up and make the plays when they need to make those plays? So, as Jay mentioned, really look at those injury reports. Next game on the docket here, it was flexed. It's the Giants-Commanders game. They played a couple of weeks ago to a 20-20 tie. Both teams come in at 7-5-1. Both teams, as we speak, are playoff teams. So whoever loses this game, it might ultimately cost them a shot at one of those wild card spots. 60% of the tickets right now are on the Commanders. They're a 4.5 point favorite. Giants are 5-1 against the spread. Their last 6 when playing Washington. Washington is 4-1 against the spread. Their last 5 home games. So something has to kind of give here with these two. But a big game. I think you look at Washington, and as hot as they've been, they've kind of gotten a little bit healthier. On the flip side, the Giants have just had a number of injuries on both sides of the ball, which have really hurt them over the last month or so of the season. They were in a position to win that game against Washington, ended up tying that game, which ultimately might come back to haunt them at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I've been incredibly impressed with what the Giants have done all year. I found myself cheering for the Giants. Obviously, Daniel Bellinger, the young man here, Palo Verde High School, just across from Red Rock, standout tight end, got injured in the middle of the season, has come back, but excited for him and his future. But Brian Daboll and what he's done with this Giants team has been absolutely fantastic and just making them competitive. But for me, and you see it in the ticket count on Washington, is just this situation of they play Washington, then they have to play a home game against Philadelphia, and now they have to go here on the road in a flex game against the Commanders, who had the bye week this past week. So they got the 2020 tie with the Giants, then to their bye week, and then right back to the Giants. So all they've been thinking about for 3 weeks is New York Giants, New York Giants, New York Giants. And
it's a huge rivalry, though.
I just see this being a great spot for the Commanders.
It's a big game, again, as we mentioned, for both these two teams. I think the winner really has a shot to be into the playoffs. The loser, it's going to be really difficult to sneak into that spot, and we'll see how that tie ultimately plays in toward the end of the season. Another game now on Sunday, Lions-Jets, which I didn't think we'd be talking about this game when the season started. Two teams that are usually picking at the top of the draft board, but Lions-Jets, both teams on the cusp of playoff spots. Lions are on a roll. They're 5-0 their last 5 against the number, and they've just played really, really well on both sides of the ball. I mean, they were on Hard Knocks early in the season, and they had some bad spots where they got blown out at home. But you look at that skill position set that they have. You look at the way that Jared Goff has played of late. They're playing really good, and it's a Jet team that has had the quarterback change. They're good as well, and the number's kind of hovering around pick. I'm curious to see which way you guys push it, who ultimately will be in the favorite in this game. But both these teams need this game if they hope to sneak into a wild card spot. Yeah, strangely enough, you talk about Lions and Jets and the fact that we're talking about this game. This is actually going to be our morning in-game kind of game of the week. This is going to be the game that's on the sound here at Red Rock on Sunday morning, and it's a big game. It is a big game. You think about both of these teams have a chance to be in that playoff hunt, especially with the Giants and the Commanders going to knock somebody out. A win for the Lions really puts them off in the top. They've played absolutely fantastic. Right. They've hit a softer part of their schedule, but they've been winning the games in front of them. Their only loss was in recent was a 3-point loss to the Bills on Thanksgiving Day. Amonte Brown has been absolutely fantastic. Jamal Williams is good, starting to get Swift a little bit involved in the offense. But really, what's Goff done? Jameson Williams, DJ Chark.
What they've been able to turn around on the defensive side of the football, and kind of get after guys. This is an interesting flip, though, going to the Jets. We talk about the Jets has been. They're a really good defense. Sauce Gardner causes problems. They're able to cover guys on the back end. It'll be a great young matchup, St. Brown versus Sauce Gardner. It is the Lions traveling on the road to what is expected to be a cold outdoors Meadowlands Stadium. Yep. The Jets are a really great, scrappy defense, but they've really struggled on the offensive side of the football, in particular since Breece Hall has gone down. Right. They've got a bunch of receivers, but Mike White, who was good in the game against the Bears where he made his debut, and he's just been kind of so-so, and last week he took an absolute beating. Got knocked out of the game twice with rib injuries, ended up in the hospital after the game. He's expected to be the starting quarterback this week. If he's not, they are going to go back to Zach Wilson as their number 2 guy, not Joe Flacco. So there is some injury question marks on that Jet team that may make this game flip from the favorite. But I think this is an awesome game, and obviously talk about from a playoff standpoint, it's a defensive matchup versus an offensive team that I'm excited to see, and excited to see where these teams continue to go in the future, because I think both of these coaches are guys that could stick around with both these teams for a long time, and we could be talking about the Lions and Jets moving forward for several years. There was a lot of chatter early in the season that the one thing the Lions needed was a quarterback. That Jared Goff did struggle early in the season in some big games, but he's played great over the last 6 weeks of the season, really cut down on the turnovers and INTs, and now that they're saying he is our quarterback, and they have the Rams pick, which is I think the number 4 overall pick now, and their own. So they're a team that could really kind of rebuild that defense pretty quickly through the draft, having 2 picks in the top 12 or 14, which will really help them if Goff continues to develop the way he has. And they're in a division that's wide open. We talk about the Vikings. If you went back to 1-score games and reverse the 1-score games, they would be like 2-10 or something like that if they lost all the 1-score games. So the Bears have been down. We all know what's happening with the Packers are down. The Vikings are stealing the division right now. But this division's wide open moving into next year and the year after. All these teams are kind of in a rebuild phase to see who's going to get there first. So you touched on a little bit of the Bears. We talked about the NFC North
So the Bears are one of the bigger dogs on the board, almost 10-point underdogs. They play the number one seed in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 9.5-point favorites industry-wide. Over 77% of the tickets are on the Eagles. Eagles have the Cowboys on the cusp coming up the following week. Eagles are 5-0 against the number, their last 5 when playing the Bears. So they've owned the Bears of late. Yet the Bears have gone 5 straight over. So with that offense now, with Justin Fields really settling down and turning that offense into a kind of a scoring machine, a lot of points have been scored, and that really favors Philly as well, who gets off to those really fast starts and scores a lot of points. You just have to wonder if Philly is kind of looking a week away when they play the Dallas Cowboys.
You said it, is Philly amped up to play the Bears, heading out on the road, as a 9-point favorite? We saw Dallas with the back-to-back games against somebody and then Houston, and they kind of really weren't able to get up for the Houston game and had to squeak that game out late. And I guess if you're looking for any scenario where the Eagles maybe just struggle through this game, don't put a full offensive effort together, the Bears can potentially steal this. But again, we've got Jalen Hurts on the cusp of winning an MVP, them on the cusp of winning the division, securing a number 1 seed with a win this week, and then obviously beating Dallas next week. So I don't know that this Eagles team has got a slump in them, or obviously the one loss to Washington, but they just do everything so really well right now, both from a running game, the passing game to A.J. Brown. The Bears defense has been lackluster. They're going to have to kind of do what maybe the Texans did last week in being able to force some turnovers, get something that's going on the defensive end, which the Bears have just struggled to do over the last several weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun Bear team to watch. I think early in the season they were talking about is Justin Fields our guy or not. He's really settled in to be that guy. Montgomery, he's a good back. Claypool is still kind of learning that offense a little bit. They've got a lot of young players on defense, and they're kind of in a position right now where they could retool quickly too. More money than any other team to sign free agents when the season's over. And right now they pick third. It looks like they're going to get locked into either number 2 or number 3 spot, which they can rebuild that defense pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I'm sure Will Anderson is high up on their draft
board. Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, both guys, 2 disruptive forces on the defense if it comes out that way. Another game we're looking at in the AFC, Titans-Chargers. Titans really have stubbed their toe of late. Chargers had that big win the other night against Miami. This Charger team, you look at their schedule, all winnable games down the stretch. Tennessee loves the road, though. They're 5-1 against the spread. Their last 6 on the road. The Chargers are 6-1 against the spread. Their last 7 against Tennessee. So something has to give. But you guys like the Chargers in this one right now. Although we've seen this number come down. It's one of those games where money kind of favors the dog, but ticket counts favor the favorite, where over 70% of the tickets are on the Chargers in this one.
Well, again, we remember what we saw last, and that was the Chargers looking good and beating the Dolphins, a team that is in the playoff.
Titans have looked horrible back-to-back weeks now.
Horrible against the Jacksonville team. You expected Jacksonville to go into Tennessee, and Tennessee, Derrick Henry, to do what Derrick Henry does against Jacksonville, and that's have the 220-yard rushing game. And he started off great. I think he had 90-plus yards and a touchdown in the first quarter, and then that Tennessee defense, which has just been awful against the pass.
They turned it over a bunch of times, too. They had a 13-3 lead. They turned it over, I think, 2 or 3 straight possessions, which really changed the complexion of that game.
The Chargers are one of the bottom teams in the league against the run from a defensive standpoint. Miami was unable to get the running game going. Tennessee will lean on Derrick Henry here, and you talk about why they have such success on the road, is that's because they deploy Derrick Henry on these defenses and control the clock. And so that's why you see such a small number here in 2 teams that really need a win.
Yep.
Tennessee is still sitting,
Tennessee's in a good
as
spot.
the AFC South winner, holding on to that number 4 spot in the playoffs. This is, a must-win for the Chargers. They've got some other outs if they lose this game. They've got a really soft schedule down the stretch, so this isn't a catastrophe if they lose this game. But both of these teams want this win.
It's interesting that you say that, because we kind of talked about the Jets and the Lions having an opportunity to kind of get into the playoffs. There's a scenario where the Jags get into the playoffs and win this division as well. So not 3 teams that we've kind of talked about frequently in the past, but all 3 that if they really finish the season strong could be in a position to possibly make the playoffs. Another game we'll look at now on Saturday, Bengals-Bucks. Cincy's been on a little bit of a roll. 5-0 against the spread their last 5. Tampa, though, is 5-0 against the spread their last 5 against Cincy. We've seen Cincy really kind of move into that spot right now where they're just really battling with Baltimore to win that division. They seem to be getting healthy at the right time. Over 86% of the tickets are on the Bengals. We've talked about it, Jay. This just isn't a good Bucs team. This is one of the, Brady doesn't look like Brady. That offense can't seem to get anything going. They've won some games, but this last weekend against San Francisco, the first time a rookie or first-time quarterback making his debut was able to beat Tom Brady. He was 9-0 in games. Purdy and that team just kind of dominated Tampa throughout the whole game. And again, not a very good Tampa team. And we've talked about Jacksonville. We've talked about the Jets, the Lions. Carolina in this division controls their own fate. So although they traded Christian McCaffrey to San Francisco, they traded Robbie Anderson. They're a team that if they can win out and they play Tampa Week 18, Carolina can actually win the NFC South.
Yeah, and we've been banging on this drum. We've been banging on the drum before the season even started. I think if you went and watched every episode of Bookends from the start of the season to today, we've brought up the Tampa Bay Bucs and their struggles, and
you can watch it.
and how bad we truly believe this team looks. And every week you expect the Bucs to rebound, and they're short point spreads, and they just don't. They're just not a very good team. They've gotten some lucky wins, and I don't even think it's them going to win the games. I think it's the team that they're playing.
They should have lost to the Saints 2 weeks ago.
Failing to finish the game. And this is another spot where it's a short price on the Bengals, a team that continues to want to win. They're currently sitting in the 5-hole of the playoffs. They've got the Ravens leading the division, sitting in that 3-hole. And believe me, Cincinnati wants to take over that 3-hole spot, secure that home playoff game, not have to travel on the road. And as they sit in the 5-hole right now, they would have to travel to Tennessee. And despite the fact that Tennessee's really struggled, nobody wants to travel to Tennessee in a playoffs to face Derrick Henry. So flipping that spot with the Ravens is where the Cincinnati wants to be. And Cincinnati's really found a new weapon in Samaje Perine. We saw Mixon do it for years. Perine has now been awesome out of the backfield. It was a lot of Jamar Chase last week after Higgins and Boyd both went out of the games. Higgins expected to be back this week. But really, the Bucs are just such a struggle on offense, and Cincinnati just seems to get better and better every week. I just can't see how the Bucs can keep pace with this Bengal offense that's just the threat to score on every drive.
You're right. We keep saying that we expect the Bucs to kind of bounce out of it, and that
we don't expect it. The line expects it. From looking at the numbers, it's like there's an expectation that they're going to find it this week, and they just never do.
I mean, I think I've said it, that if they get into the postseason, it's Brady, that, can they flip that switch or not? So far, as you mentioned, they haven't been able to.
Well, they've got a chance to win the division and sit in the 4th spot.
And they would host the playoff game.
They'll host the Cowboys, which they'll probably be a home dog against the Cowboys if they're able to get in. But they're going to get into the show. And if you want to go look through the future book right now, I think you'll find the Buccaneers at probably a higher price on the STN Sports app than anywhere else in the city because our guys and ourselves, I just don't. There's not a lot of faith in the Bucs to be able to win the NFC or to be able to go steal another Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. All right, now we're going to look at a game in our backyard, Patriots-Raiders. That was a game that was supposed to be on primetime. The Raiders' only primetime home game, and it was flexed out. It kind of speaks volumes of what the Raiders' season has been this year. It's kind of a pick'em game. We're anxious to see which way it actually gets pushed as far as betting goes. A couple of stats here. Raiders are 5-2 against the number of their last 7 home games. Patriots are 5-0 straight up the last 5 times they've played the Raiders. Really thought you guys might jump off the Raiders after that bad loss to the Rams, but 62% of the tickets are on the Raiders. The Patriots had that big win against Arizona. We know Kyler Murray got hurt. They've got a real winnable game here, but their last 3 weeks of the season is the toughest of any team in the league. So this is a game I think the Patriots have to win. They've snuck into that number 7 spot right now, but to maintain a playoff spot, I really think the Patriots have to get this one and probably 2 more toward the end of the season.
Well, you talked about the Raiders and the matchup, and the storylines of this game are, there's no shortage of storylines between Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniel from a head coaching standpoint. The mentor versus the tutor. Obviously, these guys coached forever together in New England. We have a Raider team playing a Thursday night game with a lot of rest versus a Patriot team that played the Monday night game and now playing on a short week in Arizona, staying out west, now playing the Raiders. So there's a lot of things working against the Patriots in this spot. Obviously, a disaster of a Thursday night result from the Raiders from a playoff standpoint, with letting Baker Mayfield and the Rams steal that game from them late. But a good scenario from the rest standpoint. And I talk about the cluster of injuries. Again, Raiders getting healthy, may get some guys back. The Patriots are on the completely other side of that fence. They got banged up in Arizona. Their receiving core is very, very shorthanded. We don't know the status of Stevenson from a running back standpoint. They've been using the standout cornerback punt returner on offense, and so the Patriots have really been a mash unit, found a way to beat Arizona down there. They'll have to do it again in this pick'em game here in Vegas.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good pro football games, as we've kind of touched on, with a lot of playoff implications. Again, you've got a great game on Thursday, you've got 3 on Saturday, and a full slate on Sunday. We know you guys are all busy this time of year, as we've mentioned. Honey to-do list, everyone's getting in the holiday spirit, so what a great time to get signed up for STN Sports. It brings everything we're talking about to you. We'll be back for our next segment of Bookends. We're going to touch on some of the college football games, and of course, we'll finish it up with our last segment with Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever, and of course, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll be right back on Bookends.
It's football season, baby. And you know what that means. It's time to bet your buns off. And when it comes to sports betting, you better bet with the STN Sports App. So what in the heck are you waiting for? Download the STN Sports App today and trust the local favorite.
Hey everybody, we're back here on Bookends at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. Before we jump into college football, Jay, we have to touch on World Cup. The finals are set right now. France and Argentina, the number 2 and 3 ranked teams in the world. I think it really, sets up to be a great final. What do you think about this matchup?
Well, we saw Argentina with the big 3-0 win against Croatia, really kind of dominated gameplay. And then today, France able to knock off Morocco with a 2-0 win. And so it was really kind of a World Cup filled with upsets.
Right.
Obviously, both Croatia and Morocco not expected to be in the semifinals. France and Argentina.
Well, Croatia was in the final 4 years ago.
Yeah, but still able to pull the monster upset over Brazil, who was the favorite to win the entire tournament. Gave Argentina kind of an easier path to get there. France kind of went through somewhat of a road that they were expected to go through outside of Morocco. But again, these were teams you talked about, number 2 in the world versus number 3 in the world. Argentina gets the extra day of rest. France is a very, very slight favorite here on the 3-way line. France plus 70, Argentina plus 180, and plus 210 on the draw. So you can see how you're getting the big plus prices on those teams. Over under a 2 with a slightly over. Essentially on the goal line, France will be like minus $1.15 on the goal line. So it's going to be a tight game. It's exciting to see Mbappe and Messi. We'll see if there's a big penalty kick that comes down to win this game. But I'm really looking forward. You're going to get up 7 o'clock in the morning.
7 o'clock Sunday morning, going into the pro football. It's football followed by football. So get here early. I'm sure we're going to have a huge crowd. It's going to be fun to watch that World Cup championship or final going into the pro football schedule.
And again, we've been talking the whole World Cup about the guys and the job they've been doing on putting up the props. And, check the app out, and you'll be able to find that laundry list of props that we're going to be able to put up again on the game. Again,
some really
game
cool
is on
same
Sunday.
Game props.
Yeah, so look in that Saturday, Sunday morning for the props that just continue to go up. And, the plan is to put a lot of props from the soccer game to this week's pro football games and mix some props with France and Argentina, Messi, Mbappe, and a host of the other players to NFL guys to score touchdowns and teams to win those games. So, again, no shortage of props. Just check out the app.
And I agree with Jay. I mean, a huge shout-out to the entire Hub team that just does a tremendous job of putting all this stuff up and being on top of it and making it kind of fun and interesting for you guys. We've got a lot of feedback about how much you love all these kind of same-game props and all the different props that we put up. They put a lot of time and effort into it. So I just want to say thanks, guys, for doing a great job with that.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a place Sunday morning, obviously all the host of racing sports books with our giant monster big screens, a great place to go watch the game on Sunday morning at 7 o'clock. I know as we sit here in Red Rock, monster movie screen type seating to be able to watch the game. They'll be on all 3 giant big screens for the entirety of the game until the NFL game start. Obviously, a perfect matchup, 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So even if it goes to extra time or penalty kicks, should be able to get the whole soccer game in before the NFL schedule starts. And then join us for that Sunday of staying around and watching all the NFL games.
Great football day. That's all I can say. Anyway, before we get to a couple of our favorite segments, we're just going to touch on a couple of bowl games real quick. A couple of games this weekend, BYU, SMU. SMU's a small favorite, 5-point favorite in this game. About 60% of the tickets are on SMU in this game against BYU. And then you got the Las Vegas Bowl as well on Saturday morning. Florida State against Oregon State. 57% of the tickets are on Oregon State in this one, Jay.
Yeah, first of all, SMU, that game opened a pick, was pushed all the way up to 5, so we did see a lot of early SMU money with some question marks on BYU at the quarterback position and who was going to be playing in this game. Has started to come down a little bit, but again, a pretty evenly matched game. We'll see what those two teams do, and then obviously we get Florida versus Oregon State here in the Las Vegas Bowl.
No Anthony Richardson,
played,
of course.
Played at
right?
Allegiant, a monster Oregon State, a 10.5, 11-point favorite here because of with no Richardson playing for Florida. But a SEC versus Pac-12 matchup that normally you would see the SEC team a pretty good favorite in this type of matchup. But don't sleep on Florida. I mean, obviously we're questioning what they're going to be doing at the quarterback position, but they are going to be starting a young man, Jack Miller, who is an Arizona native, recruited to Ohio State, pretty heavy recruit, 3.5, 4-star recruit, went to Ohio State, transferred out of Ohio State to Florida, is going to be making his collegiate debut. But again, he's a high recruited player, so he could be one of these guys that really vaults them and again vaults them to the next level and wants Napier to go get this recruiting and all that type of stuff. So don't sleep on Florida getting a lot of points here. And obviously Oregon State, Pac-12 coming here to the West Coast and
they travel well, right?
They're going to be down here in droves, and a lot of their guys are going to play. So should be a great game out there at Allegiant. Time change on it moved to 11 o'clock in the afternoon because the Raiders game on Sunday was originally scheduled at the 5 o'clock game and has now been moved to a 1 o'clock game. So they need some time to get the stadium ready for the NFL game following on Sunday. So just be aware that Las Vegas Bowl is played a little bit earlier in the morning on Saturday.
Well, there's a lot of other bowl games that we could touch on, but real quick, we just want to touch on the two college football playoff games, Ohio State and Georgia. In this game, Georgia continues to get a lot of love, where 79% of the tickets are on the Bulldogs. In the TCU-Michigan game, not quite that big, but about 65% of the tickets so far are on the Wolverines.
Yeah, and the news came out today that Travion Henderson, the star running back for Ohio State, is not going to play in this game. He hadn't played about the last 3 weeks of the season. He'd been banged up for quite some time. Obviously, Ohio State and the running back committee, it's been next man up, and the next guy up has been able to perform. Obviously, they didn't do so in the game against Michigan, but with all the time to practice, Ohio State, that running back committee is still going to be good. But a lot of the money, as you talked about, has been on Georgia with this game being in Atlanta, and Georgia has been rolling through these semifinal playoffs, and we'll just see what kind of Ohio State can do to get up there.
I think it'll get probably pushed up to 7, don't you?
Yeah, we'll see where if we take some money on Ohio State. I know we've had that conversation several times about going to 7 with Georgia. So, I hesitate to say this, but if you are a Ohio State fan, maybe to wait to 7 and then you could potentially buy that hook and get 7.5.
Or you could always buy off, but I'm not sure what a key number is anymore, right?
But TCU Michigan, we've seen the early money again be on TCU, driving that number down from Michigan 9 down to 7.5. But again, these games are several weeks away, and try and make money on the NFL this week and the World Cup soccer, and then there's a load of bowl games as we go through the next several weeks. Not a monster opening bowl game slate this December 17th weekend. But as we move into the next 2 weekends, some really good bowl games on the board. And we're really hopeful that we're going to get to see some of these teams play their guys, play their starters, coaches stay in their homes and go play these games, because it's really been one of the worries the last 2 years is just about the kind of absenteeism in these college football bowl games and not guys playing in the game.
Yeah, I'm excited about so many things going on. We didn't really touch on the NBA and the NHL. The Knights continue to kind of play well. They've had some big road games that they've been able to kind of win.
They're the Road Warriors.
Road Warriors right now.
Big win at Winnipeg.
And that's with guys hurt. You saw Eichel's on IR right now, so a couple of big wins there as well. We're going to come back, you guys. We're going to get into our final segments that we love, and that's Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever. And, of course, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can hear John queuing up that music right now. We'll be right back on Bookends.
Hey there, my name's Stephen Money, and here's why you should bet on me, the STN Sports App. These are my best buds here at Station Casinos, like my friend Jimmy here, and he'll help you get on me.
Wait, that sounded weird.
Cut.
It only takes a few minutes to sign up. Just park at any of our 14 convenient sign-up locations, walk in, and you'll be signed up in minutes. And don't worry, I got all your favorite sports covered, and a lot of betting options. So what are you waiting for? Download the STN Sports app today and trust the local favorite.
Hey everybody, we are back here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for our final 2 segments, which we love. Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever. Can't say it fast enough. And the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's kick it off with our fantasy football segment. And first is going to be quarterback this week, Jay. I really like Derek Carr. I think there's nothing to lose right now with the Raiders. They're playing the Patriots. Who would know that defense better than Josh McDaniel that he went up against in practice with his offenses there? There's a chance that you might have Waller and Renfro back. Adams has been just a beast. Jacobs has been phenomenal. Hopefully he's healthy enough. I'm going to go with Derek Carr. I think that really opens it up on Sunday against the Patriots.
Yeah, and you saw McCoy after Murray went out last week. McCoy, he had 2 really bad interceptions, but he did have some receivers running around wide open all over the field. He just missed them. We also saw Hopkins fumble in a key situation, but there were some open spots on the field there for Cardinals receivers to find holes. You had a great pick last week. Kirk Cousins had over 400 yards passing against the Lions last week. Weren't able to punch. I think they got the one touchdown pass, but definitely had a nice pick with your quarterback there last week. So I can see Carr having the big game if he's able to find some holes in that Patriots secondary.
And who do you like?
I'm going to go, I always talk about going to the well, but that Tennessee Titans defense has been absolutely atrocious the last 2 weeks. We saw Trevor Lawrence throw for 368 and 3 TDs last week, and the week before, Jalen Hurts had 380 and 3 TDs. So I'm going to go to Justin Herbert, who last week threw 51 passes against the Dolphins. They haven't really tried to push that running game, and I don't know that they'll do it to the Tennessee. I think Herbert has another game where he attempts a ton of passes.
Don't you think it's a direct correlation, though, because this is the first time all year that they've had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams actually finish the game?
Absolutely, and again, Everett and Palmer, they've got the receiving guys all ready to go. Herbert
Eckler out of the backfield.
Threw for 367 versus Miami, and so I think this is a big week that he goes and has a big week throwing against the Titans, and you really hope that the Titans are able to kind of match him in points so that he has to continue throwing in this game.
Yeah, I think he's going to, too. I think you just look at that defense, and they've just been shredded through the air right now. So I think it's a really
one of the
good
things
pick.
when we talk about both of our quarterbacks, you're taking Derek Carr, who obviously plays indoors here in Las Vegas at Allegiant, and I'm sticking with Herbert, who plays, obviously in Los Angeles and indoors. And I think one of the things you need to look at when you look at that East Coast schedule, and there's not a lot of wind this week, and I don't think there's a lot of precipitation, but you are talking about guys playing in 20 to 30 degree weather, and despite the fact that obviously they can pass in that, when you can find that comfort and confines of playing indoors, and whether it's with your quarterbacks, with your receivers, with your kickers, something to look at, especially as you enter your fantasy playoffs. And on the defensive side, don't play guys that are in these home stadiums. Play guys that are in those nasty weather where the fumbles and picks and those type of things may happen.
I'm going to jump to running back now. I kind of like Dante Foreman for the Panthers. I think it's a Panther team that has really exceeded expectations since they made the coaching change and traded McCaffrey and Anderson. When he's healthy, he seems to be dynamic in that backfield. I know that when the trade first happened, there was a lot more ink about Chuba Hubbard, but I think when you look at Foreman, that offense kind of runs behind him. They're playing a kind of a beat-up Pittsburgh team. I'm going to go with Foreman, I think, for the Panthers to have a big game on the ground.
Yeah, and they've been doing it on the ground, and they've been excellent on the ground. The one thing you got to kind of somewhat be scared of, and I know I saw a lot of comments last week, is was it Blackshear was the guy that came in and scored the late touchdown against Seattle? So you got Hubbard and Blackshear that potentially could steal those touchdowns. But Darno really hasn't been doing anything on the offensive side of the football. DJ Moore is a disappearing act for the Panthers. They've really been getting it done with the running game. And I'm going to go back to I always like to pick on the Houston Texans with my running back, and Tony Pollard had a big game, and you on top of my Tony Pollard, you added Smith or not Smith, in there, and so it was anybody on the Dallas.
Anybody on
the Dallas running. So I'm going to go to the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, he had like 70 yard rushing on 13 carries against Denver. I think he's only topped 100 yards once, but this can be a game where the Chiefs should be able to run a lot here. I don't think it's McKinnon out of the backfield. I think it's Pacheco running the football, and I think he'll put up 2 touchdowns this week against the Texans.
All right, wide receiver, I'm going to go Michael Pittman from the Colts. They're coming off their bye week. We've touched on this in the past, that the Vikings are number 2 or the second worst team in the league, giving up catches and yards after the catch to wide receivers. I just think Matt Ryan, if you give him a little time, that Michael Pittman's going to have a huge game for the Colts. Keep this Colts team in it. I think it's going to be a lot of Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, and Michael Pittman. I'm going to go with Michael Pittman, who has a 100-yard receiving game against the Colts Jefferson against Pittman that day, and it's going to be huge. I like Michael Pittman to get into the end zone as well.
I'm going to go to a CeeDee Lamb. And you think about CeeDee Lamb, he was a guy that was drafted really at the top of drafts, but has been a major disappointment. I mean, he's got 800-some yards receiving, but only 6 TDs, and he really hasn't had that big game. He's only gone over 100 receiving yards twice. Obviously, we had the quarterback issues early in the season. Dak Prescott hasn't been fantastic. Really a game that he almost let the Texans steal the game from them with the turnovers. But Jacksonville is a defense that I think can be exploited. I think their defensive backs can be exploited. He's only scored once, CeeDee Lamb, only once in the last 4 weeks. But I think this is a week where he finally gets over the 100 yards receiving, and he puts one in the end zone. So start CeeDee Lamb with confidence this week.
You know, that Cowboy offense is a little bit strange because we do talk about how successful of a running attack they have with both Pollard and Elliott. And to win the Super Bowl, you want to be able to run the ball and play defense. And they can. But when you look at Dak, he hasn't had a 300 passing game since last October. So he really hasn't opened it up when he's been healthy. If it's been CeeDee Lamb or if it's been Gallup or Schultz or some of these guys out of the backfield, he still has them. I think it's just a crazy stat that the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott haven't had a 300-yard passing game in over a year. And that might be one of the reasons why CeeDee Lamb has been a little bit of a disappointment so far.
And we heard all the talk about OBJ potentially going there and them looking at his health status. And this week they picked up T.Y. Hilton, who hasn't played in a year and a half.
Can you do that again?
I don't know, what is it, T and Y,
sure
what he does?
Everybody saw it.
But he's got a chance. I think he was actually, helping out the Colts from a passing game standpoint or doing something with the Colts organization. Goes now to help out the Cowboys. Michael Gallup just hasn't gotten it done. James Washington recently came off the injury list. Schultz has been a tight end. So the Cowboys are searching for something in that passing game. And obviously them sitting in that 5 spot comfortably, probably not going to catch the Eagles. But they are going to be a team that's at the top of that NFC with a chance to win that NFC. So they're searching for that other piece. And this Jacksonville team is, had their ups and downs, but this is a game that's a popular pick for them to go upset the Cowboys here. So I don't think you're going to catch...
They're still in playoff contention.
I don't think you're going to catch a Cowboy team sleeping because of the way they performed at home against Houston this week. I think this is going to be a motivated Cowboy team, but they've got to be able to find it in that passing game because Jacksonville can be exploited in the passing game.
Yep. All right, so now I can hear John. He's queued it up, guys. The music is playing. The good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, the good. I'm going to go with World Cup. I think it's just been phenomenal. I mean, I think we weren't sure this time of year, being in the middle of football season, how it would be. But we've had huge crowds in here regardless of what time the game has been. They've been hooting and hollering. There's been so many different wagering options on the board, more than we've ever had in the past. I think it's been a great World Cup. Compliments to the entire, the process and all the countries that were in it. And I can't wait for Sunday for the Argentina-France final.
Yeah, I know our guys are looking forward to it ending so they don't have to get up at 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning and add these games to the schedule. But it's been awesome. I'm going to go out and for my next 2, I'm going to go hang out in the great state of Pennsylvania. And with my good, I'm going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Had a 7-game losing streak. End of October, early November. However, they've really changed it around. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. They've won 6 straight. They're one of the hottest teams in the NHL, and they haven't been doing it against the bottom teams. They've been beating the top teams in the conference to come back on this. So take a look at the Penguins because they've been really on a hot streak to make you some money in the NHL hockey.
I'm going to go in our own backyard, and I really struggled with this one, and it's the Raiders. I mean,
this is for the bad now?
The bad,
okay.
Yeah. I really, you look at the Raiders, and they should probably be in the playoff hunt right now. I mean, 4 times this year they've had double-digit leads that they let get away from them. I mean, you're talking about this game on Thursday night. That they were bet heavily. It was a great outcome for us. I mean, from the fans' perspective, we want to see the Raiders do well, but having the Rams come back and win that game outright was a phenomenal outcome for us. It kind of springboarded the entire weekend because they got beat. But you've got a quarterback in Baker Mayfield who doesn't even know the playbook, was sent the playbook but couldn't download it on the plane, so couldn't even study it. Basically had about 36 hours to go through the process. It's 4th and 10. You're winning the game from the 20-yard line. No timeouts. And you don't play a zone and a safety over the top. You play press man that all he has to do is throw it in the end zone. It's a 50-50 ball. Van Jefferson won that. I just don't know what the Raiders are doing. I don't get giving up this many big leads this year. Last year, they won a lot of those close games. We know they had won the 2 games in overtime. They then beat the Chargers. Looked like they had turned the corner, which would have put them back in the wild card discussion. Unfortunately, I'm going to go with the Raiders with the bad. I think they've been a big disappointment in games that they should have won.
Yeah, when you talk about being and blowing 4 13-point or more leads and losing those games.
Hasn't happened in 45 years.
And where they're sitting, just outside the playoffs. Even if they just win 2 of those 4 games that they blow, they'd be in the playoffs right now. So very disappointing from that standpoint. And I told you I was going to stay in Pennsylvania, so on my bad, I'm going to the Philadelphia Flyers, staying in the NHL. Started the season 6-2. Sit at a 9-14-7 record right now. But in their last 20 games, they are 2-18. So if you've been betting against the Philadelphia Flyers, you're making a ton of bank. Again, 18 losses in their last 20 games. The Philadelphia Flyers are my bad.
You're bad. All right, the ugly right now. I'm going to kind of go to the bowl games a little bit, and I love bowl season. I love the championship format now, and I love that they're going to be expanding that in 2 years to have more schools involved. But this isn't the same bowl season that you saw 5 and 10 years ago. There are so many kids right now that are in the transfer portal, so many kids that are opting out for the NFL draft, that it's just not the same level. I mean, bowl games used to be it. You qualified for a bowl game, it meant so much. The handle on it was terrific. Now you see so many kids that aren't playing. It just has kind of changed it, I think, more from the fans' perspective when I say the ugly.
Yeah, and it's tough on the betting public,
right,
and people trying to bet these games as well, when you're not sure who's playing in the games, you're not sure who's coaching the games. It really has...
And every day you see something new.
Yeah, college football, and I think they're trying to fix the problem with the expanded playoffs.
Agreed.
Where we see the more teams that are going to be engaged in that process, and it's just something that has changed over the course of college football. And really, the transfer portal is probably the number one reason to it. We always kind of seen the coaching changes as we go into these bowl games, but really that 6th win and getting to a bowl game was coveted in years past. And getting in that bowl game, being able to go on the road with your buddies and play against a team that's not in your conference, and a head-to-head matchup against another conference was awesome. And that's one of the things, when you talk about bowl games, when you look at these early bowl games, one of the things that I always look at from a handicapping schedule standpoint is how do certain conferences perform. So if you start to see the SEC struggling, or the MAC struggling, or the Pac-12 struggling, when you get to the end of bowl season, you're normally going to see, some conference that's 1-6 in their bowl games, or their teams went 5-1. You don't see a lot of the 3-3, 500 type bowls. So if a conference starts struggling, maybe that conference is a little bit down, and the records aren't there. So it might be something to go and play as we get to the later bowl games. If you find one of these conferences that's playing above their head, or kind of playing under what's expected from a conference standpoint. So something to look at early in these bowl games and get a read on the conference. For my ugly, I'm going to go to the NBA. And I think last week I was in my ugly in the NBA as well, with the San Antonio Spurs. And how bad they were struggling. And now the new team that's really on the struggle is the Washington Wizards. They're 1-10 in their last 11 games. They've lost 7 straight games. And now they're about to embark on a 6-game road trip out here to the West Coast. They take on Denver, the Clippers, the Lakers, Phoenix, Utah, and Sacramento. Their leading scorer, Porzingis, has hurt his back. Don't know his availability for this West Coast swing. Bradley Beal, who's been out of the lineup with a hamstring, might start to be available as they enter this West Coast string. So Washington's just been a real cluster, just struggling to put a win on the board. They've been tight in these games. They've been being able to play some tight games, but this is a West Coast string against some West Coast teams that are really fighting for some wins. As you look in that whole West Coast bracket, that it's really, really tight. I think this could be a continued struggles for the Wizards. So maybe something to look at, the Wizards struggle on this West Coast trip, as they've been struggling for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, guys, there is so much that we kind of covered. We hope we gave you some kind of great tidbits for this week's kind of sports calendar with all these different things going on. And again, I can't stress enough, we know everybody's so busy this time of year. It's such a great time to get signed up for STN Sports. We're just voted best racing sportsbook, best mobile app. So if you don't have it, get it. It's so user-friendly, and it really does bring the sportsbook to you guys. Thanks for tuning in. He's Jason. I'm Chucky. We'll see you guys next week on the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends.